Jamaica's first certified international trade professional, Mr. Robert Scott, was the senior national trade advisor for the Ecoris Lumin consulting team that executed the World Bank group-funded Jamaica Trade Information Portal in 2018. He is the Dean of the Consular Corps of Jamaica and the Honorary Consul to the Republic of Latvia in Jamaica. He firmly believes that gravitas is critical for successful leaders in the world today, and he's providing his invaluable insights as an additional perspective. His presentation explores cultural intelligence and global indexing. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Robert Scott.
It's indeed a pleasure to be here presenting on this topic that is of very, very importance, especially at this time in the geopolitical maelstrom that is taking place. And I would like to start by defining what is soft power. And I'm sure we all recognize that it is the ability to influence through attraction and persuasion to make things happen in a way it needs to happen. This term was coined by Joseph Nye, who is an ambassador diplomat in the US, and he really spoke to the fact that soft power shares the preferences, making others want to align with us. And it's done a lot through culture, arts, music, sports. And I will share some examples of what takes place, not only in Jamaica, but in other territories. The political values, the governance, and as you recognize that in some areas, when you have an impasse, that certain individuals or certain countries are asked to mediate. And this is because of their high political value and the relationships that they would have established in these territories. And of course, the foreign policy credibility, which is the legitimacy, the consistency, and most importantly, the moral authority that is exhibited by these either individuals or countries. Now, one may ask, why does this matter? The fact is, soft power builds trust, which is a critical ingredient in problem solving. It strengthens trade and diplomatic partnerships. And the fact is that the world now becoming a village, people are interacting all over the world. So we need to have those relationships and that trust and that credibility that will make people want to do business with you. It enables countries to attract tourism and investment, with certain for small island developing states. This is critical. And then, of course, it enhances your global responsibility. And this is tremendously important. So, extremely happy to speak to this matter, to speak and to learn about soft power and how it can, in fact, be implemented. Now, does soft power still matter? Absolutely. And as I share that, influence today is actually driven by the trust, the credibility, and the perception. Because the economic power that you may have or the military power alone, it can no longer guarantee global influence. And you see that is playing out right now in many theaters of the world. And so therefore, reputation, very importantly, shapes the trade, the tourism, the partnerships, and ultimately diplomacy that exists between customers. And of course, the chairman of Brand Finance made a point that soft power has never been more important, restoring equilibrium to the international system. Cultural intelligence, which is considered the new diplomatic currency, but it's not really very new. And this was coined by Christopher Early and Sun An in around 2001, which came out in their book, Cultural Intelligence, Individual Interactions Across Cultures in 2003. And it ultimately is the ability to work effectively across cultures. And it goes way beyond etiquette, but it involves mindset, the empathy, and very, very important, the adaptability. And we got examples from that, from the very wonderful presentation we had before. Now, the high CQ strengthens negotiations, the alliances, and ultimately the crisis response. Now, even taking it away from diplomacy, I want to give an example that I didn't understand the term at the time, but when I had a presentation to do in Vietnam, I did a signature program there. And my research told me that I had to do some training of myself before. And there are a number of things at the time that the Vietnamese were offended with. You cannot point to a Vietnamese. You cannot speak with them with their hands in their pockets. And from my presentation, the reality was that we are accustomed to presenting and getting feedback that allow us to interact with the customers. I learned that you are the instructor, so they are not going to challenge you, they are going to listen to you. And I never understood the extent to which this was in fact true. So when I had in my program that, okay, I will be asking a question here, asking a question there to get some feedback, there was no feedback. They expected me to speak to everything. So ultimately, what I had to do, and by the end of the first day of the training, I had to prepare more slides because then I realized that I would be the only one speaking in the room. And this is an aspect of cultural intelligence that understands, that allows us to understand how the cultural idiosyncrasies of the various markets and countries that we are interacting with. And ultimately, that understanding helps you to work effectively across cultures and allow you to get done what absolutely needs to get done. Now, this is where it really starts to get interesting. This is from soft power to soft power 2.0. The traditional soft power relied on culture, diplomacy, education, working with trust, and more qualitative than quantitative data. Now, soft power 2.0 has data, perception metrics, and various global rankings. So now you can actually put a number to the value of the reputation that you have and other useful indices. And so therefore, it removes the guesswork. It allows for better planning. They're able to approach this in a very structured way. And so what it simply means that influence is now measurable, comparable, and consistently evaluated. So you can compare where you were last year or to this year, compare between various countries. And for example, in a soft power ranking, I saw where Jamaica, my country, fell from 86 to 87. That is something that our policymakers certainly would have to look at and see, well, all right, what do we need to do differently? And what, in fact, influence that moving downward? And it is something that we really must analyze. Now, global indexing ultimately is really ranking countries on various criteria, could be governance, business, education, innovation, and there are several indexes around. We're speaking to one. There's also the soft power index, the competitiveness index, and governance indices. And these rankings do have an economic benefit because it shapes investors' confidence and their diplomatic credibility. I can tell you in my country, whenever the US puts out a travel advisory that is not complementary to the country, we do have cancellations. Now, what it does, it sends us into a flurry in terms of having meetings and increasing our advertising, and it makes it more difficult in the absence of having any indexing to show exactly where you are and whether those perceptions are in fact real. So global indexing brings a level of objectivity, which is certainly very helpful for commerce, for business, and for government relations. And the Global Soft Power Index, just quickly as an example here, there are 8 soft power pillars, and 35 national brand attributes. And all of these allow you to do some ranking in terms of creating familiarity, how well a nation is known, their reputation, how positively a nation is regarded. And this certainly is a guide which we didn't have many years ago. Now, indexes matter for small states. And in my analogy here of a David and Goliath situation, that for small states or small island developing states, it levels the playing field. It provides information based on hard data for businesses, investors, and policymakers. And I must say the advantage that it is independently created and verified is very significant. One of the problems with small island development states is that we have very little data on which we do our business. So having this data verified by a third party and independent body is critically important for us. And this perception is in fact real. So the more that we can adjust the perception to what the reality is better for our countries, it is better for attracting the investment. And of course, there's a feedback loop, which is something that's very important. Our cultural intelligence, I think we agree that it improves our engagement and our global perception. Now, that positive global perception, it improves the rankings and the global standing in those matrices. And with that improved ranking and global standing, it reinforces our national soft power and our influence. Unfortunately, the converse also applies, that with falling cultural intelligence, it reduces our ranking and therefore it creates a downward spiral. So, in other words, this has to be managed extremely well. Now, protocol is in fact a strategic tool because the modern protocol signals respect, competence, cultural fluency, and protocol professionals are reputational managers and trust builders. And if this has not been emphasized, I think it's something that really must be emphasized in each particular country. Because as protocol professionals, you are almost the front line. You may work a bit behind the scenes, but you are the front line. And your role has to be able to create this reputation, this positive reputation for that country. And every interaction in business, we call it the moment of truth. Every interaction reinforces or erodes your natural brand equity. And of course, I must speak a bit to the Caribbean and Africa that Caribbean diplomacy leverages warmth. You have to have relationships doing business in places like Jamaica. I know it's extremely true for Cuba and the business interactions I've had with that country, and also within Latin America. So in many of the quote unquote third world, small island developing states, in these other areas, the relationship building is critical. And we certainly had a good discussion on that in the earlier presentation. Now, Caribbean speaks to that relationship. African diplomacy balances the tradition, the hierarchy, and that modern global engagement in such an effective way. And ICT enables smaller states to really build an outsized influence internationally. And I'll mention a point on Jamaica pretty soon. Now, I want to get into some specifics, some examples, and I hope that this would be of interest. When I look at soft power in action, I look at sports, and I give the example of Rwanda. There's a long-term relationship that started in 2018 and really only came to a close in 2025. And this multi-year partnership seems simple, but it was tremendously effective. They created a relationship with Arsenal Football Club, and they simply had on the sleeve Visit Rwanda. And of course, there were global digital broadcasts, there was a lot of social media, branding, and so forth. But just by virtue of putting Visit Rwanda, it sent that message, it advertised in a powerful way. And you have to recognize that the English Premier League is viewed not only in the UK, but in over 200 countries. Over 200 countries are seeing this and looking at the players. And it reaches the youth market, who, they would follow football, but also the business elites who also follow sports and football, and the global media. So this worked tremendously. I don't have numbers as to the extent of the success, but it certainly did work. And it's all not to be considered as sports sponsorship, but in a very powerful way, it's strategic nation branding. And this is not the only example in Africa. I want to speak to others that both South Africa and Qatar in hosted the World Cup, South Africa in 2010 and Qatar in 2022. And there were a number of dimensions which I quickly run through. The one that we spoke about is the sponsorship of a global club, which allowed for continuous long-term visibility, and it helped to reposition Rwanda as being safe and investable. This had also a major impact on tourism, I understand, and it allowed moderate scrutiny. So the reputational risk was actually quite low, but it created strategic visibility in the soft power. In the area of the World Cup for both these territories, it was a 1 month focus area. Now, in that 1 month, South Africa wanted to rebrand itself as a capable continental leader. If you want to do business with Africa, you come to South Africa first. Well, that's a powerful message. And Qatar, similarly, they want to position themselves as a global hub and modern Gulf power. So this is well beyond advertising. This actually looked at these major sporting events, tied in with governmental support, tied in with private sector support, allowed for a wonderful visibility. And this is certainly something worth copying. Now, as I come closer to home, the European Union in Jamaica, they have been extremely active, and not just in giving funding and supporting programs. They've created the last 3 years a 5K race, which was geared towards assisting crime, reduction of crime, but also providing funds for various charities. And you see here myself with the ambassador and the other delegates, and it pulled first year 2,000, second year 4,000, third year 6,000 people coming, getting the messaging from the European Union, interacting with persons from the European Union. And this worked particularly well. So, of course, the soft power by the European Union is very well done in Jamaica, but this event, I thought, really got to the common man in the street to get the messaging, participate, and interact. So, for sports, that worked. Now, I have to speak to my event that I created in 2011, which as the Honorary Consul General for Latvia, I wanted to be able to promote the country. And I came up with the Latvian Independence Regatta, which started in 2011. And the only year we've skipped was for 2000 because we couldn't do anything because of the pandemic. And this year we will be having the 15th installment of it, which we are the only country that celebrates a national day with a yacht race. And we've also included rowing and surfing. And it's not hard because I'm the president of the Yachting Association and the head of rowing in Jamaica and also the vice commodore of the Royal Jamaica Yacht Club. So I was able to pool all these resources, build on these relationships. And it is actually the most supported yacht activity for the whole year in Kingston. So this really works well, and it's an opportunity to message. A lot of people didn't understand how the flag of Latvia was created, one of the oldest flags in history. We know that Crocodile Dundee was originally Latvian, and the person who actually invented jeans was a Latvian. Just an opportunity to share interesting trivia, but to let people learn about the countries. And as I mentioned, this is the most successful of all of the sailing events that takes place in Kingston, Jamaica. And then just a few examples. So this is the invite, and I send out a photo of along the course in Kingston Harbor. And this is a picture taken by one of Jamaica's most revered photographers, who died a few years ago, but this is one of my favorite photos that he did for my event. And we have the prize giving, where I give out handsome trophies. There's a red blazer that is given to the winning skipper, and trophies, and a lot of activity that takes place. As I said, this is actually one of our most famous activities for sailing. And moving away from sports, in film and culture, we've also made a difference. When we look at the European Union Film Festival that takes place in Kingston, Jamaica, where all of the European Union countries, or at least 12, will have movies. Latvia, of course, does have their movie. And we're able to message, for example, in 2023, when this photo was taken, I was involved with human trafficking, or reduction of human trafficking, let me put that more accurately. And we showed Olaf, which was a Latvian film about human trafficking and modern day slavery. And so, in the entertainment of the film, there was also an opportunity to message about what we need to do to reduce human trafficking. And so that has been extremely successful. And the Indian High Commission, which is so well known for health initiatives throughout the country, they operate in most of the administrative districts with various activities. And they annually they have an event where they promote yoga. So here we had a couple of hundred people at our national gardens, and we had an hour and a half of yoga, which certainly helped to endear the the Indian community, which is approximately 1% of the population, to the general population, and of course, a bit of exchange of their culture. So generally, when the Indian High Commission, whether the current one or previous ones, go into a space, they are so well regarded because of this consistent manifestation of soft power. And of course, there is some evidence I like to put here that there is an economic value to soft power. Jamaica is one of the top 5 most recognizable national brands globally, and this is done by Bloom Consulting, that does only city and nation branding. And it is valued at 33 to 35 billion dollars. And that's a fact. But the qualitative benefit, I believe, was signaled that in October, when we had Hurricane Melissa, many international bodies had boots on the ground. They were sending, Belgium, for example, alone sent 400 generators. And the international appeal was phenomenal. And this happened at the same time when the Philippines also had a national disaster. But at least this side of the world, all you knew about was Jamaica and tremendous support. And this, I think, is perhaps the very best example of the value of soft power, that when you're in need, your friends come and give you assistance. And I humbly submit that there are a number of things that leaders must do. They have to institutionalize cultural intelligence, make it continuous with the benefit of these indices, make sure that it's measurable, and of course, have these benchmarks into the hiring or promoting of individuals who certainly show these qualities. They must manage global indices strategically, identify 5 or 7 priority indices, and allocate the resources towards them and give it the necessary support. Thirdly, elevate protocol to reputational strategy. Protocol cannot exist in a vacuum, and we heard that said earlier, but it must be an effective part of the strategy of the country to build. And the smaller you are, the more important it is. And you need to select your platforms intentionally. It's not ad hoc or what it may be more convenient, but actually do the work. And we see how Rwanda benefited by working with football. And then, of course, use the sort for feedback loop that when things go wrong, it will get worse. But when you're doing a good job, it will also help you, and one will reinforce the other. And as my time is at an end, my closing thoughts that in the modern world, influence belongs to those who understand people and perception. And soft power too, we're not only operating in that best way, but also using the data to support it. There was the empathy, consistency, and cultural intelligence. And I am very honored to have been able to share this with you today. And I'm happy
Thank you very
to
much.
answer any questions if there are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert C. Scott, for this insightful presentation. You indeed illustrated that cultural intelligence is the new diplomatic currency, and with possible ramifications into variations such as multicultural and intercultural awareness as a strategic nation branding opportunity. In a data and value-driven world where what cannot be measured does not seem to exist, the topic you presented on the global indexing is essential and objective tool to driving international collaboration, especially in the current emerging multipolar world. So I was monitoring the questions. There is no question at this point. However, I would like to encourage everyone to reach out directly to Mr. Robert C. Scott on LinkedIn, and you will be able to continue the discussion. So thank you very much again. And now I would like to bring over to my moderator colleagues. Thank you.